Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tangible ChangeMakers podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest with us, Wendy Salvaggio. Actually, what do you want me to call you? This would be a good thing to ask. Wendy Woo or Wendy?
Wendy Woo.
Okay, so
Wendy
let's
Woo.
start that over. So, hi, and welcome back to the Tangible ChangeMakers podcast. We have with us a very special guest today, Wendy Woo. Now, Wendy is one of my dearest friends, and she's somebody who is definitely on the path of the seeker, like I always have, and she's kind of stepping into that wisdom keeper role with me as well. And we have a lot of parallels in our journey together and our lived experience. And I thought she would be the perfect person to talk about a topic that we've been having a lot of discussions about. Is the name of our podcast is Tangible ChangeMakers. And we've been talking about change, like how do you change things? And change, life is constantly in motion. It's constantly changing. But how do you create real change in the world? It first begins with having the ability to change yourself. And there's a lot of steps and things that we get to do, like having an open mind and being willing to question things. Mm-hmm. Except for, I know that we grew up, Wendy and I, and Will, to a point, to a degree, he had a little bit of a different experience, but Wendy and I both grew up in really religious households where we were taught, and I think you'll agree with this, that questioning God was a sin. It's a sin to question God. It's a sin to question. You just have to believe things on faith and take things on faith. And you were constantly taught not to question things. And for me, I was born a child that was I questioned everything, and I was not a follower. I have, in my human design, we talked about this today, I have the anarchy 7.3, which is the anarchist in my human design profile. And I've just always been a person that has questioned everything. And I know that Wendy is very much in that same mindset of questioning things as well. And what we want to talk about today is how do we get to the point where we can stand in our own knowing, and how do we know what that truth is, and how do we discover truth, and how do we get to that? And we're going to kind of just take some just different routes and see where we end up. But it's a big question of how do we create change, and with first change with ourselves. And I think what I'd like to just start it out with, when we're born, we come into this existence, and we're born into our human body. And we carry with us 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So our DNA, we already have some proclivities and tendencies and things that are woven into some woundings and things that are woven into our DNA. And then the first 6 years of our life, we're in a theta brain state. Basically, we're being programmed, or the Toltec wisdom would call it domesticated, or human design would call it conditioned. But that first 6 years of our life, we are being formed, our agreements and beliefs and language and everything is being formed by our caretakers. So our parents, or whoever the primary people are that are taking care of us. And then about the age of 7, we start to have a conscious awareness of self, where we start to understand, who we are as an individuated person, and we start to figure out how we fit into family and how we fit into like the role we play in just discovering who we are as a person and where we fit into the, there's a lot of studies about like if you're the first child or the third child, or, position in family. And then also, we start into school, and we start to be homogenized by the school systems and programmed into that. And we're taught to follow along, to trust, to give your authority away, to trust authority, to trust, respect your elders. We're taught to this is what you believe. And then as we move into our 7 to 14 age, or 14 to 21 age group, where we're starting to develop our own sense of autonomy and who we are, and try to figure out how we think in the world and who we are, and separate from our family a little bit and how we think and process. We have all these things that have been programmed in, and these agreements that we've accepted as truth. And then for some of us, we just go along with that and we get on the hamster wheel and we do everything the society expects us to do. And we go to college and we get a job and we get married and we have babies and we just do life on this hamster wheel. And, we get work until retirement and then we take our money and, and go. That's the plan.
Go on healthcare.
And go on healthcare and then we're done. And so that's the process. And then there's some of us who have this innate desire to understand why are we here, and we just question everything. It's in our nature to question.
Yes.
And what I want to talk about today is how do you break free from that conditioning and that programming? How do you break free, and how do you determine what is truth and what is true for you, and take that risk to even, for me, I believe very differently from my family. And it's been very difficult. Sometimes I'm afraid to put myself out there. I'm afraid to talk about these things. I'm afraid to be judged. I'm afraid to isolate myself, and create a separation because I have a different belief system. And today, like in this podcast, I want us to be open to talk freely. And we're not saying that we're the arbiters of truth or we hold any side of truth or that we have the way, but we all have our own lived experience and we've all determined what worked for us to get us to where we are today. And so we want to get you to think about these things. And a lot of people have never even sat and thought about, I have all these belief systems. I have all these beliefs and all these things and all these stuff that I have to do and these shoulda, woulda, couldas. Mm-hmm. And are they even mine? Are they even authentic to who I am?
Exactly.
How do you get to that authenticity? So that was a lot. So Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Is there anything? Wendy has so many different skills. She's an incredible Akashic record reader. I mean, really, really tapped in, very, very intuitive. She's a perpetual student of life like me, constantly learning and studying. And she just has a very deep esoteric and quantum knowledge. So
well, thank you.
Lots of good stuff to come today. So,
well, thank you so much for having me, number one, and for the introduction. Thank you so much. So that was a lot. So if we were to tap in and say, who am I? What is my purpose? Mm-hmm. That's a loaded question. And that's a question that everyone has the moment they wake up in the morning. What am I going to do? What am I going to wear? And who am I going to be? And it's really interesting because we are taught from a very young age to trust and to not question. But yet when you wake up every day, you're being constantly asked questions. Aren't we? What are you going to do today? Where are you going to go? Did you study? What did you learn at school? We're always asked a question. So if we were to look at the Bible, we even see that. I am that I am. I am. Am I? Am I that? Do I exist like this? I exist. How do you exist? So it's interesting that some of us fall into these tribes, because us not wanting to stand up to the tribe is really that very first thing of, oh my gosh, I have to now ask a question. And then the tribal leader of the family is now telling me that I can't question. Yet we're also told to go in prayer to question. So who's telling the truth? Is it the authority figure that's standing there in flesh form that's telling me that I can't question? Because I don't recall anywhere in the Bible it tells me not to question anything at all. I don't recall any scripture that says that. But then again, we are dealing with a book of half-truths. And I say that lovingly because it was so edited down and it was voted upon by a group of men to bring to the masses in such a way that they could control everyone. So from the very beginning of its existence, they're not even bringing forth the whole entire truth of everything. And from what I've been shown and from what I know to be true, is that when we were to look at the scriptures, there's some truth, but there's also a lot of contradiction. But from what I know to be true, and from my self and sitting in contemplation and meditating, and also tapping in and receiving, from what I know to be true, is that the all that is of source God creator is that there's nothing on the outside of God, nothing. And so within that umbrella, everything is there, from the shit to the bliss. So there's, when they say, well, it's the inspired word of God. Well, I'm also inspired every day to speak. I'm inspired to say something now. I'm inspired without this. I'm inspired to say what I need to say. And it's not landing well with the tribal leader. And yet this tribal leader is supposed to lead me, or am I tapped in to receive the inspired word because it's written on my heart? It's written within the very being of my being. And I would challenge anyone to say, well, what words are not of the all that is, of the source creator God? Because if there's nothing on the outside of that, then what words are not of source creator consciousness? Because it's the consciousness we're dealing with. And so from that very beginning, and this hit me when I was at when I was living in my RV, when I was living in my RV, for 3 years. Yeah, you remember that. And I shut everything out and I walked, and I realized that the very first primordial sound was just a sound. Boom. Wow, that's consciousness that just said, are you God? Are you, or are you not? And how about we just trust and now just start challenging those beliefs? Because I challenge you to find out what words are not inspired and what words are not of God. And that when you look at something that only has 66 books in it that were all voted on by a council of men, they're limiting us. They limit us to say, this is it, and this is that, and you better not say it. But I don't recall ever seeing anything in the Bible that says you can't question. You can't question at all.
And on that note, the topic of New Age spirituality and New Age religion is something that is coming up a lot, and that's really being brought to my forefront. And then I have a lot of friends, because a large majority of my friends and people from my home and my family are all deeply, deeply religious, and they believe the Bible says it. I believe it. It's God's word. You don't question God's word. But what they don't realize is that there were the original text of the Bible. There's so many different interpretations of it. For one, there's multiple different interpretations, thousands of different versions of the Bible. So which one is the inspired word of God, and which one is correct? And I think it's difficult, but for us, we get to learn what is correct for us. I really believe that, and what resonates deep as this deep soul truth to us. And I get the Bible was canonized, and they removed a lot of books of the Bible, the original books of the Bible. So a lot of people are operating from false information. Like, they think this is all of it. And there's a lot of other books out there that weren't included because, and particularly like with the way that they kind of removed the divine feminine, and they put women down, and as property, and to be submissive and all this stuff, and they removed all of the stuff that really promoted women as equal and as as divine.
Can I speak to that real quick? Yes, because I just found this out. The term Yahweh, Yah actually means feminine, and Way is the masculine. So it actually translates over to the divine feminine and the divine masculine. But the things that are coming to light now, they should be. But that's really interesting, because they know that the women are the portals to bring in life. And, we're the creators. So, I think one of the first things we have to do is give ourselves permission to actually question. And you don't have to give anyone a detail of or or an agenda on what's on your mind for the day, especially when it comes to spiritual concepts. And that's what I did. I just allowed myself to think. And it wasn't until I lost both of my parents who passed away, and I was in a very deep, dark place, that I was starting to question a lot about my existence, because I realized up to that point, from being extremely sick and from living at the foot of the cross, and I was a very devout Christian, and living at the foot of the cross, going to church, volunteering all that I could, and studying. And it's true, there are several translations that I'm finding when I actually go in and I do deep dive into the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Aramaic, that it's not completely, it doesn't hold weight exactly to how, all these other translations into English is. So when I realized that, it sort of gave me my permission slip. It was like a permission slip for me to say, it's okay to question, because we're talking about language that has been diluted down to a point to where it's now into English, and perhaps this vocabulary, these meanings really aren't exactly how their church is presenting to us. And so when my parents passed away and I was in this really deep, dark place, and I was bedridden with Epstein-Barr virus and constantly getting sick, and I had chronic fatigue and my body hurt all the time, that's when I said, this is not working. And I actually asked, sincerely, please show me a way. And then the teachers started to show up. The two Jewish life coaches showed up for me, and I enrolled in their program. And then that was one of the first things that was a challenge to me was, well, are your beliefs your beliefs? And then when I started questioning the beliefs, that's when I realized these aren't my beliefs. And I've been trying to fit into a paradigm to make my family happy, to make my husband happy, because I had grown up Catholic, but then by the time I went from Catholicism to non-denominational to Pentecostal to now Southern Baptist, going through all of that, I should not have been as sick as I was. I'm sorry if you're living the way that I was living and trying, not being. I should not have been that sick, because we aren't supposed to be sick. We aren't. So it was as if I had to give myself permission to get quiet, to learn how to meditate, to be okay with my thoughts, to write things out. And then when I did that, I actually allowed the crystal river, the spirit of truth, to come upon me. And that's when the spirit of truth came upon me and said, well, for one, you need to stand up and take authority. And you can start learning by deep diving into the words that you have there and really learning the meanings to them, and then allow the spirit of truth to cultivate within me. And that's what I did. And I'm still learning. But I will say this, that I finally got well. I'm no longer sick. I don't stay in the bed. I have more energy now than ever. And this entire past year of 2020, in 2022, I just got sick. And I can't even say it was sick. I just ended up with the sniffles for a few days, and it lasted for 5 days, and it didn't even turn into a full-blown respiratory issue where I had to go on antibiotics, a steroid, and take a bunch of cough medicine. I was able to tap into my internal system and heal myself, because I've been shown how to do that, because I started questioning. And
that's an interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting. When we first met, both of us were dealing with extreme health issues. We met over at a combo ceremony.
Yeah.
That's what brought us together. And I had been posting about it, and she came, and we just instantly connected, and we've been, really, really close ever since. It was like an instant connection because but during this process, we both, have had just profound healing. Like we've really, like we were both like, you knew the version of me back when I was really, really sick, when I was just coming into my healing. And we've both, evolved just and on so many levels over the last 5 to 7 years. Like it's been really incredible, this journey and process. And part of it is allowing yourself to question everything. And when I take a new belief, and I know that my belief system has really evolved, and it continues to go into deeper and deeper layers of understanding and deeper layers of knowing. And I've discarded things that I held really, because I've allowed myself to just be open to the possibility, open to learning, open to new information or newer ways of understanding. And I constantly ask. I don't come from that space of I know it all now, and I'm not attached to my belief systems. And I think that's where we begin. And so for people that are really looking, if your life is not working, if you're, really deep in suffering, or you're physically ill, or your relationships are disaster and your life is not working, I was taught that suffering is this, and all this struggle was this somehow valorous. It had valor, and like there's this humility, and to be humble, and there's this deep humility that was required to be a good Christian, and you submit and you don't question, and what I've found is you don't have to suffer. I really believe that we weren't put on this earth to live in suffering and struggle. That we were meant to be, just gardeners of the earth, and tend to the garden, live in abundance and joy, and that I don't feel like, I think a certain amount of struggle and suffering is necessary, and it's part of the human experience, but we don't have to stay there. And so what I know, Wendy and I have both kind of found our way out of that, and I know Will has as well. Like we really, it's been a beautiful process to pull ourselves out of it, and it was just allowing ourselves the right. A permission slip. Will talks about permission slips a lot, so I think it's funny that you mentioned that. That's something that we talk about. I'll let him go into that for a second. But it's giving yourself a permission slip to just question, are these really my beliefs, or is this what I've been programmed by society, by my parents, by religion, by, is this something that it really feels, if I sit down with it and really feel into it, is this really what I believe? And is it okay to change your mind? Is it okay to study these other things? I study lots of things that go against my, like that I don't believe, but I just want to understand why they think the way they think. And, I'm constantly looking at alternative ideas and people that disagree with me, and reading their content, and so that I can really formulate what feels like truth to me. And for example, even with human design, I started studying human design way before I ever came across Gene Keys. I was a student of human design, and I would get into it, and I would really be like jiving with it. And then I'd come up on some of the stuff that there's a lot of human design that does not resonate with me.
Right.
And I have to say that, like, Karen Curry Parker does the quantum human design, and that system resonates with me, like, because it's very positive, and Ra was brilliant, but he was very negative and had a very pessimistic view of the world, and like doom and gloom, which felt very much like Christianity to me. It felt like there was all this dogma, and you have no choice, and you have no, and it felt, and I resisted it. I would always, and when I found like Gene Keys, the thing that I love about that teaching that really, really helped me to step into, giving myself permission to study and learn all these things. It's a path of self-individuation. It's a path that teaches you. It's an unwinding. It's not like they're adding on all these new belief systems, but Gene Keys is all about unwinding the patterning and the programming and the belief systems and the giving your authority, your power away. It's a removal of all of that stuff to get back to the core perfection of who we are as human beings, which is, we are born whole, perfect, and complete. And then we get packed on all of these stories and programming and conditioning and homogenization and society's way. And we get all of this stuff that just covers up who we really are until we start to question it. And I think a lot of people just buy the story. That's why so many people fell for the COVID stuff and the masking and the shaming. They fell for all of that because they don't. A lot of them don't even question. They just trust. They just trust. They give their authority and trust away. And that's kind of what, for me, Christianity was always about giving your power to a savior that's outside of you.
Right.
And
yeah.
And that no longer resonates with me at all. Like and I'm really exploring, and I'm very solid in my knowing now of what I know to be true in my soul for me based on my lived experience. And I think that that's the starting point is just give yourself permission to question. So do you have anything you'd like to pop in here?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just patiently letting you guys express. So I think we're all really kind of on the same page and have kind of arrived in the same space. My journey to get here has been a little different than your guys's because I was raised in the Catholic Church, but all the churches I've been in or that I've been a part of have all been very love-oriented, very New Testament-oriented. Not much of the hell and brimfire stuff. We really didn't even talk about that.
Hellfire, damnation.
So yeah, it was never really pushed in through a fear mechanism. It was very much more of a loving mechanism. But even with that, I have that same desire to really fully understand what this means and why it came to be, and also to really own it. So I dove into it very deeply, even as a teenager, to really explore what it felt and had some really profound, even paranormal experiences with it. But in the end, the more I dug into it, the more I discovered there's some truth. As you said, there's full of half-truths. There's a lot of some really good things in there, and there's also a lot of just questionable stuff. And it feels as though it's been put together in a way to create a narrative and create a way to control people, more so than to give people a mechanism to truth and self-discovery and true connection. Because even the original church, the authority was passed down from the Pope to the priests, and then the priests were the arbiters they were the ones that got to read the Bible. And people weren't even allowed to read the Bible until the 1600s. It was a long time before anybody was allowed to even really look at it, and much less question it. So for me, but I go back to this idea of truth, like what is true, and how can we determine what is true? So I'm going to take your guys' idea and go a little deeper with it. This whole idea of which version is true. How about, is any of it true? Like this could all be just a story that people made up. Yes. And I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it could be.
The possibility.
So we have to be open to this and look at it from real open. I take a very scientific view to things. I want to see it from all angles and try to really fully understand it and test it. And I test things very, quite a bit actually, to see, is there validity and is there some validation in what is being shown to me? Because it's very easy to be fooled, and it's very easy to fool yourself even. And so as I did that, the more I asked questions and the more I delved into it and asked the bigger, deeper questions, the more pushback I got from the organized religious people saying, oh, we don't talk about reincarnation. That's a taboo subject. That's not allowed. And I'm like, well, why isn't that allowed? That it's actually discussed in the Bible. They actually bring it up. They talk about it. Not specifically, but they allude to it over and over. So why can't we talk about that idea? And why is that so poo-pooed? Because in the controlled church, this is the way I see it. If you gave people that kind of idea that they come back and again, it takes away this idea of living for heaven, living for this the afterlife. So this whole idea of suffrage and being a martyr and giving yourself and having to do everything for living for the future, basically, or living for the next life, rather than if reincarnation was engaged. Wow, that kind of breaks that whole narrative down. It doesn't really jive together, and they don't work together. So, and not only that, and then I learned that there was all these other books that were written around the same time, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, these other things these other texts that have come out. And
the Nag Hammadi, is that, the Nag Hammadi, yeah.
And these don't totally, the Book of Enoch, the emerald tablets. There's all these ancient texts that are out there. When you start looking at them, they're telling a different story. Some of them are telling the same story, but it predates all of the Christian stories. And so when you start to see all this start to line up, it's like, okay. And that really bothered me for a long time, and I struggled with that. So what I did was I shifted my focus away from the story. I realized the story is just a story, and the story is there to teach us the lesson, and the lesson is in the principles. The lesson is in the moral of the story. And so I started looking at the principles and say, okay, one of my favorite quotes that I've seen from a more modern leader was from Gandhi, and he was questioned about Jesus and Christianity, and he said, his response was, I don't know if any of that was true, and I don't even know if your Jesus existed, but I do know that the Sermon on the Mount and the words that were spoken, or that story of what he said, that rings true for me, and I can believe in that. And then I'm like, wow, okay, that makes sense to me. I can put myself into a principle or a pattern and say that works for me. That works in all situations. Like, that makes sense. The story, you can change the story to whatever. You can make it some other story with the same principle, and it still applies. It's different data on the same equation is what I see.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I've approached it, and I come at it very differently. And ironically, the more I questioned these things, the more it pushed me out of my faith, you could say. I have faith in the sense that I know that it's more of a knowing than a faith, though. I don't just blindly believe something because someone told me. I have evidence for these things that I've experienced. So I feel it through my being that I know these things to be true. I know that I'm eternal. I know that this is not all there is. Well, we can look at it scientifically and we can know that, some of those things too, but there's lots of evidence for it. And as you start looking for the evidence to support those things, you start to see them. But if you're never allowed to look at it, then you'll never see it.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. Thanks. I mean, that's really awesome because it is the principle. And one of the things that I do speak to about with my clients when I give them a past life story, I tell them, this is just a story. Let's not get hung up on the story.
Right.
Let's address the energy that's around it, and then let's see where you're bringing in and you're witnessing and experiencing the same pattern in the energy in the here and now, so that you can take tangible action and shift it on its head, and then take and do something different. How are you going to change your mind and actually kind of really and truly repent? Which I found out the term repent actually means to just simply change your mind, so that you have so that you actually transform the inner being. It has nothing really to do with doom, gloom, sinning, the way that the church has presented it. It was really about the term repentance is just the renewing of your mind on a daily basis. And how can you align yourself to speak to the innate or listen to the innate that's within us, and align ourselves to experience the glory of what we're meant to experience. And also, I would say that the adversary of the contrast, at least on this plane of existence, 3D, we need to experience so that we do question it and that we do align, so that we mess up and just say, oh, that didn't work. Well, let me try it this way. Is that questioning it, or is it observing through the awareness, your conscious awareness? Is it an observation to say that's not working? Let me try something different, because that in itself is also repentance. But the term repent does hold a very doom and gloom energy to it. And so it's funny because I have looked to see what the real term means. And so when I see people yelling at someone to repent and they're demonizing them, I kind of giggle, because I'm like, that's not even what it means. It's like you're just asking someone to look at a different way. And that's why I'm shown that's why, you've got a circle and there's a dot in the middle. And when you split it up into a pie of 12, wherever you're standing on that circle, you're going to look at the middle, and you're going to see a different perspective from this guy who's standing over in the northeast part to the guy who's down at the southwestern part. They're going to see a different point. Mm-hmm. But if you walk and you stand in the middle and you just pivot and you look around, you can see, and standing on the top of the mountain, you can see a better point of view. So when we are questioning, you have to ask yourself, am I sidestepping or to find another point of view, or am I sidestepping towards the middle and stepping upwards so I can get a bird's eye view?
Right.
And so through that's what I try to do every day. And then there is a lot of self-inquiry. It was like, wow, am I being just as judgmental and holding contempt for someone because they are stuck in their mindset of dogma and indoctrination, because now I need to show compassion for them just like I would show compassion for a toddler who doesn't know any better. There's a lot of 30-year-olds who are steeped in indoctrination, and it's happened to me just within the last 24 hours. I've been attacked by somebody on TikTok, which just ticks me off all the time. Not all the time, but yeah, TikTok ticked me off this weekend. From somebody else who attacked me. Then they came to my page, and then I addressed it. And then what was funny was that when I addressed it, they said, well, I told you once before and I warned you. They attacked me, and I was like, dude, you came to my page. Like, I'm just sharing with you something that I have, and I told you I have compassion for you because you just don't see what I see, and I've told you that you're just not ready to hear the truth of what I have to say. And now you're blocking me because you came to my page and started a fight, and now you're going to block me. Okay, bye.
Yeah,
it's just funny.
Lost there.
yeah. But anyway, I just kind of went off on a tangent there, and I'm sorry, and I don't know why I did that. Oh, because I'm a Gemini squirrel. So
really kind of brings out a bigger point, and that is definitions. And this is something that Lois and I talk about quite a bit. And one of the fundamentals problems that I've seen come up time and time again is that people are arguing. When people get into arguments, they're arguing from two different perspectives, as you described. Mm-hmm. And they're both maybe correct. So there's a really good meme out there where they show this image of it's a flattened tube that's square on one end, flattened to a point on one end. And if you look at it from one angle, you see a triangle. If you look at it from the bottom, you see a square. If you look at it from the side, you see a circle or another. And there's all these, and all of those views are all correct. They're all true.
All true.
But they're not the full truth of what we're looking at. And this is part of what I see is why we have all these different fractal aspects of God all co-creating together so that we can start to develop a greater understanding of ourself, which is the God self of all that is. And all those little facets of the crystal are all adding to that, whether they're good or bad, negative, positive, however you want to frame it, doesn't really matter. The shadow is required as well to create form. Without shadow, we just have blinding light and bliss, and that's great for a little while, but it's not very productive to do much. There's not much you can do with it. And it's not very good for understanding. So definitions is one of the things that we talk about a lot. And I think especially when you start talking about God, one of the most misrepresented ideas is people say the word God, and one person's definition is this being that somehow has autonomy over all of us, right?
Sky Daddy.
Sky Daddy. And then some people have the God of, there's the gods of the, Hindu religion and other religious texts and other perspectives. And then I have more of my perspective is that I see that there's layers of God. So the ultimate God to me is the all that is, as you described. It is omnipresent, omniscient. It is all of these things because it is all things. Mm-hmm. But it's not judgmental because it's all those things. It becomes nonsensical at that framework. So, but as you go down the onion or you peel back layers, you could get into, say, what you would call a demigod, a galactic consciousness and understanding, or a solar system, the sun. Then you have the body of the human. Like, are we not gods to the cells of our body? We have trillions of these cells. They're all little individual life forms that are all co-creating together to create this form. And I have autonomy to just end it all if I want right now. I could just go in the other room and be done, and they could all be done, right? Or I can direct it into the other room to go get something to drink, or we could go
to exercise and take care of it.
Yes, or take care of it, nourish it, love it, meditate, all these things that we have. And we have this relationship that goes back and forth. So there's these layers, and it's fractal in nature. You can see the fractals come out. And it goes down deeper and deeper and deeper into the atomic level, then the subatomic level. It keeps going. And almost to the point where it like spirals back on itself. And
it does. It's a spiral.
Yeah, it spirals in.
It's a toroidal
like
spiral.
A toroidal flow. A toroidal flow flows through and then comes back out the other side and recreates itself over and over and over. Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and to not be able to explore that, to me, is a red flag. To say you cannot question, do not question.
Yeah.
When somebody says, okay, so even if God really said that, even the Bible doesn't really say it, but even if the Bible said on the first page, do not question anything written in this text, that'd be the first red flag that would make me toss it to the side and go, you know what? This isn't worth worshiping, even if it was true. I don't want to worship a God that can't handle my questioning. My little peon me. If my kids couldn't question me,
I was about to say kids.
Like, what kind of parent am I to say, oh, well, you better not question me or I will send you down to the pit of hell forever. That doesn't add up at all, even in our lowly, quote unquote, tangible lifestyle. As a parent, I know I would never look at my kids and say something like that ever. So I can't imagine an all-powerful being would ever do that, or a loving being.
Right.
So that's how I look at it.
It's really interesting that here we're bringing up children because children are in that state where they're very hypnotic or whatever, and they're very programmable. Yeah, the theta brainwave. So when when you do think of that, I'm just going to invite people to just sort of like look at that. When Yeshua says, be like that of a child. I know, and through quantum healing, you get to that brainwave state, and because we have the 73 trillion cells, and we are a fractal, and we can speak to this. You're getting into the infinite mind, and we can program that on our own. And when I was a child, and I'm being dragged I'm being taken to the Catholic Church, and I recall running from my parents and hiding underneath the tables that had the drapes over them, and I'm scared shitless to go, and I know that I don't want to go, and they're taking me, and it just like the whole entire thing just sort of scared me, and I would sit and I would look at the Catholic book. It was really beautiful because it had like all the angels and all the artwork and stuff in it, and I would look through it, and then I would say to my mom, yeah, mommy, when I was a grown up a long time ago, and I was recalling having past lives, and I was trying to express this to my mom, and she's like, oh, no, like completely shutting it down. And I'm like, no, but really, when I was a grown up, and then I came back to be little again, and that, I think, I got shut down real quick. But I think that when we finally look at what is written by the consciousness of the people of that time, they were receiving inspired messages to channel them out. But as human consciousness expands, we are no longer under that subjugated mentality that's solely wrapped up in what they thought, because that was their messaging, and I'm receiving my own messaging, and I'm sharing my own messaging with you, and you're sharing your own messaging and inspiration with me, and we're doing that with each other, and we are igniting each other because we are energetic beings. We are energy, just like water. So let's take water, for instance. Okay, water freezes. Water is fluid. Water will boil, and water will go into a vapor, but it's still part of this element that just changes form. And us being part of God's source consciousness, we change form as well.
And we're 74% water.
And we're 74% water.
Well, and another to add to that too is that water hydrologic cycle, we come from the source, which is the ocean of all that is. Like the water collects at the base and the ocean, and the soup of all, it's all amalgamation.
Primordial soup.
And that evaporates out, it comes up into the sky, and then it moves around somewhere and it precipitates out, and then it can end up in all kinds of places. It can end up in a beautiful brook and be and nourish the life that lives there, or it can end up in a septic tank and help the bacteria, allow them to break down the waste. And it flows and it comes back around, and it does it over and over indefinitely. Yeah. And it's a perfect analogy or metaphor for spiritual consciousness and how we reincarnate and go through the cycle over and over cycles.
And what was so funny when I did my very first quantum healing hypnosis session was that when she brought me into it's called the Symbolistic trance. That's when you actually are in like the deepest part of the trance so that you can heal yourself. So when she started bringing me into that, she asked me, she brought me down off of a cloud. What's the very first thing that you're seeing right now? And I'm like, soup. Like I'm literally looking into a bowl of porridge or soup, and I'm seeing my reflection back at me. So I'm looking into like the depths of water, but because I didn't have the language, it was really interesting. But as time has gone by, I always think back to that session, and so then after that, hearing the term, I'm seeing soup. Then from that point on, as the years have unfolded, I'm hearing, yes, the Akash is just a soup. It's just, it's just fluid. It just is there. And we are able to tap into all these different little aspects of it and grab knowledge that we need at the time. Because one thing for sure that I woke up one morning from my sleep, one thing that I was shown for sure, that if we knew all that there needed to be, that we would be living our lives so paralyzed, we would be horrified by the truth of all of it, like completely horrified and terrified. So it's actually a blessing that we come to this world with a state of amnesia, and that we're just questioning, because we are little gods here on earth, seeking to find itself and know itself even deeper. And there are institutions that have been set up because we do have cause and effect, and yin and yang, and good and bad. We have these institutions that have been put in place to try to prevent us from knowing the truth of who we are. And so we're like, you know what? Nah, that's not vibing with me anymore. And I take authority over myself, just like Jesus took authority over himself in the wilderness, and I'm in the wilderness, and I just look at him as an example, because when he came here, what I find is that the message is the message that delivers us to save ourselves. And it wasn't because of, I'm going to be really rude here, but it wasn't because of the crucifixion that we're saved. It's because he came and bring a message to tell us that we were divine. And he was teaching that, and then that pissed everybody off. Oh my God, if they all knew that they were really this.
Yeah, it's blasphemous. And
it's blasphemous.
And that's the we were having this conversation this morning about God, and God, my brain is just going all over the place with all the thoughts where I could take this with. But when we follow personalities, we get caught up in the story. This is something that Will has been really like impressing. We've been having lots of conversations. We get caught up in the stories, but when we follow the principles of what they were teaching, and Jesus taught love and peace, and he was not judgmental, and he went, and he sat with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and Zacchaeus, the undesirables, and he healed the sick, and like he really, and he didn't cast them out or judge them or elevate himself above them. He said the answers are there inside you, like the kingdom of God is within. Like there's. And he was teaching these principles of love and peace. And if you look back over all of the sacred texts, like I love the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching, and I love anything that has to do with Toltec wisdom, the ancient Toltec, because those things resonate. They're all principle based. They're all. It's not. You're not worshiping a personality.
or a book,
or a thing. You're learning to live by principle. And if you understand that this is the principle, this is the way that the laws of nature, and the way that nature works, and the way that the world works, and the way that we came here to work, and you live by these principles, then you can create a life of abundance and beauty and ecstasy and joy and bliss. Like, you don't have to be in suffering. There is, like Will said, there is a necessity for contrast, because that's how we determine, and that's how we learn and grow. You know, exactly. We make the mistakes and we do the things. But if we could look back, if you take, it was interesting. I was having a discussion with a friend yesterday who works in a local school system, and she was saying they're not allowed to use the word yoga in school at all. It's a bad word. Like, not allowed to mention it, not allowed to talk about it. It's not allowed to be used in their classrooms. Yoga. And it's really interesting. I was like, what? Because yoga, when I first started doing yoga, I actually was training to run an ultra marathon. So I was going to run a 50-mile race, and I was running 230 miles a month, and I got bursitis in my hip really, really bad. And I went
I think so.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I did that for a really long time. This doctor, and he said, if you want to keep running, you're going to have to start doing yoga. And he said, I would recommend getting in hot yoga and doing yoga and learning that. And so I started going to yoga just simply to learn to stretch and get in the heat and be able to extend my body and things like that. And so I started doing yoga. And as I got into it, I started just really falling in love with it. And then I decided to go to yoga teacher training. And I started learning the 8 limbs of yoga. And that is what, and I've always said this, that's what kicked off my really waking up and really stepping out of my attachment to my deeply rooted, like, I was terrified to question religion. I told my parents I was going to yoga, and they were just horrified. I mean, like, oh my God, yeah. And as I started into learning the 8 limbs of yoga, what I realized is yoga is based on principle. I mean, that the 8 limbs of yoga, if everybody lived by that, oh my gosh. And it's basically all the same tenets in the Bible, but the same principles that Jesus was teaching. Right. You know, do no harm. You know, use your words to uplift and to, you know, and to practice. Don't steal. Like, there's just all these different things, and it really was, yeah, it's basically the 10 commandments are basically the 8 limbs of yoga. You know, don't flip around and have random sex with people, you know, and then as I dove into, like, the Tao Te Ching and, like, all these different other teachings, they teach you to live in a principled way. And if you follow and you honor nature and you honor other human beings, and you have your whole life is sacred, then you're going to make different choices. And so if we let go of the personalities, and what I started to learn about, like, Hinduism, my mom didn't like yoga because of, you know, oh, it's Hinduism and they have all these gods and they're worshiping all these gods and idols. And I said, but each god represents, they have a set of characteristics and traits and virtues. And they also have, like, weaknesses and strengths. And if you look at them and you learn from the mistakes they made, you can take those lessons and apply them to your life and not make those same mistakes. Or you can take the powerful parts of their personality and the things that are really, you know, empower you to live this beautiful, virtuous life, and you live by those principles, then you can create an amazing life, you know? Yep. And as I started diving into really learning all these other things, I fell in love with yoga. Like, I fell in love with not only what it could do for my body, but just the principles that it teaches that you can embody in your life and carry out. And that's the thing I'm learning now about Aikido. Like, I knew about Aikido through, you know, Richard Rudd talking about relationship Aikido, which is about blending, and Aikido is all principle based. It's based in understanding these principles and ways of being and living, you know, in fluidity with nature. It's kind of like that water of just being in flow and flowing with and living.
But in a tangible way, like
it's
an embodiment of principles.
Living. It's like actually walking your talk.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a practice where you're practicing the embodiment of these principles through these techniques and things, and learning self-defense at the same time. Like, it has all these benefits to it. So
Oh,
it's really
cool.
powerful in that way, for sure.
And I think that the embodied, like where we learn to walk our talk, that's one of the biggest things that I have about Christianity or so-called Christians that I know is a lot of them, they go to church on Sunday, they show up for show, but they're not living any of these things. And then they get, oh, I can just ask forgiveness or whatever.
Right.
They're not living, they're not walking their talk. And I got really, excoriated, just really bad on Facebook in a conversation a few weeks ago, and about my beliefs and what I realized is that I know in my heart, and I don't consider any of the beliefs that I follow as New Age religion, because I'm really much more interested in understanding the ancient teachings and the teachings that have stood the test of time, and they're all principle-based teachings, and they've stood the test of time. And if you live by those, instead of following personalities, if we could stop following personalities, we could probably do something about our politics as well. We get all attached to a personality, and we don't look at their platform or their principles or what they stand on, and we love them or hate them based on that. And then we attach ourselves to a philosophy, and we're not getting anywhere as a society. It's not serving us as a humanity to be constantly in this division and dividing and getting caught up in the stories and the right and wrong and all of that stuff. If we could bring our country back and our lives back personally, like if I start living a principle-based life, and honoring, and I think it's pretty much the context from every major religion comes back to, love your neighbor, do no harm, treat people the way you want to be treated,
The golden rule.
do the golden
rule.
That's pretty much the tenet of, and if we could just do that and get out of all of the division and the need for labeling and naming things and classifying ourselves. I don't really, I am.
I know what I was about to say.
I don't really have a religion anymore. I don't
either.
subscribe to one particular philosophy. I am constantly evolving. I'm constantly changing my belief system. But I'm very grounded in these principles that I live by. And I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm not putting on a show for people. I am authentically walking my talk. And I feel this deep wholeness and this deep security in who I am and how I operate in the world and the relationships that I'm in. And I can set boundaries for myself now, and I can share those with others because I know my own personal intrinsic value, which is perfect, whole, and complete, as is everybody else.
Right.
I just don't all know that. I still haven't spent the time to unwind the programming, the belief systems that have them constantly giving away their authority. And I really believe that if Jesus or Buddha or any of them were here today, they'd all be like, "You got it. That's it. That's what we're trying to say.
Yeah. It's so funny because I was telling I was sharing this with a loved one, because doing the definitions and looking and deep diving into certain words, I feel that if Jesus was walking the earth today, he would be horrified and he would be saying, you know what, you're using my name incorrectly, because the name, you're using my name in vain. And number one, name actually translates to authority. Use my authority, the authority that I have within myself, in order to create what I need to create, because I'm also creating. So taking his name, that's why it was like, well, I'm not going to know you. Why are you using my name? I don't know you. You use your authority in that. And so it's very eye-opening when we can really look at things a lot deeper and unfold, like the peeling away of the onion, and realizing that that there's a lot more in-depth meaning than what's just been shown. And what I found is that Christianity kind of gives you this, it allows you to behave in a certain way, and then saying, oh, well, that's okay because I'm just saved. Because I just said the word, well, I'm saved. And it's like, well, how are you resonating? I mean, have you really changed? I mean,
right.
Are you really loving? Because love is also, it's a vibration. So if we're looking at the love and the actions, the intention, and putting the emotion behind it and taking the different action, that's when you have the outcome. That's when the outcome is there. And it's funny that you brought this up, because they do teach us that we're unworthy. And so I opened up my Bible last night. Can you believe it? I did. I opened up my Bible. I go on so if I'm going to say this to the audience, if you go into Bible Hub and you start clicking on Greek, Hebrew, and then it takes you to like the Strongs, and then it gives you like a list. It'll give you like the list of all the different terminology and meanings behind something. I found out that, to pick up your cross, when you pick up your cross, actually means to stand up. When you stand up, that's one thing. So that got completely bastardized and said, no, you're picking up your cross and you're suffering. That's not how it is. That's not how it came to me yesterday. But also to say that someone that is not worthy of themselves, when you're not worthy, that actually meant when you don't stand up, you're not balanced. The whole entire word of unworthiness, of worthy, actually translated to balance. And I was like, whoa. So if I don't stand up and I don't speak and be true to myself, then I'm living an unbalanced life. And that was written in red. And that whole entire thing right there had been a translation that came back to me completely different, as in what is being taught today. So when you're coercing people and let's look at it this way. If I was to say, I'm involved in a relationship, and this person on a daily basis tells me that I'm not any good, I'm not beautiful, I'm messing up and I'm falling short constantly. And because I try and try and try my best, that no matter what I do, it's still bad, even though I'm trying with a sincere heart, that I just need to be punished at all costs. Because if I'm not going to love them because of my insecurity and because I've tried and tried and tried, because I'm not loving them back, I deserve the very punishment that comes to me, even though I'm trying with a sincere heart. Now, if I was to say that to you and say, this is the relationship that I'm in,
I'd say, get out.
You'd say, get out.
Run.
Run.
Get out. Call me. I'll come pick you up.
Come move yourself out.
Yeah. But yet our Christian religion is telling us to stay in, because they're saying that Jesus is this narcissistic individual who is demanding us to bow down, kiss his feet, and to worship him. Oh, exactly how Satan tried to persuade him to do in the wilderness. So why on earth would Jesus or Yeshua demand the same thing to me when he wasn't teaching that?
And he refused to bow down to Satan.
And he refused to bow down to Satan.
Exactly. Why would he want us to worship him?
Right.
He was like, no.
Right.
Even if he did, independent of any of that, there's something about that just throws red flags.
Wrong.
Ding, ding, ding. Like, what?
Ding, ding, ding.
Is that worth keeping?
Please find the exit right away.
Yeah, get out of there. It's
take your fire extinguisher.
Yeah,
drop the ball.
View of God and Jesus Christ is as the way it's taught in a lot of religions is extremely narcissistic. And if you were in a relationship with a person like that, you would tell them to get out. I mean, I have a degree in psychology. That's what I studied my whole life. We would tell you if somebody's exhibiting those behaviors, get out. Exactly. It's interesting that you bring up the whole take up your cross. Will has a really great analogy about the take up your cross, because I think a lot of, and I'll let him share it, but a lot of Christians also don't, they basically just sit back and say, oh, God's got it. Jesus, he died on the cross for my sins. He's got it. I don't need to do anything. But that's not, share what
Well, I specifically don't recall any verses in the Bible where Jesus said, hey, everybody, just chill out, kick back, I got this. He never said anything like that. He taught you, he said, stop sinning, stop doing this, stop doing that, just love people. Like he was really clear that you have to take some action here. This isn't all on me. I'm here to show you the way. And showing means to embody those principles. He's embodying these ideas to the point where they crucified him for it.
The
He
method.
didn't do that for the sake of everyone else, so they didn't have to do anything. That was, I think, that was a misrepresentation by the church, and it was taken over to instill this idea of victim consciousness in the population. And guess what? Now you're a victim, and you have no power left. You are powerless to change anything, and you are, like as you said, doesn't matter what you do. You need the blood of Christ to survive and to get to the reward that you're living for now, which is not for now. It's for some other place. And this is the other question that always brings me. I really like to poke at people a little bit with this and say, what does heaven look like to you? Like, define that for me. Describe that in tangible terms. What heaven is going to be like. Is it really streets paved with gold? What do you eat? What do you do? What is the purpose of being there? What is the day-to-day? Is there a day? Is there sun? Is there moon? Are you on a planet? Where are you? What is your tangible experience of that? And most people just go, they give you this blank stare, like, I don't have any clue.
Never really thought about it.
Haven't even thought about it. So you're living your entire life for something you haven't even contemplated? What it's going to be like? It's quintessential to the point of who are you? Like, what is this? Like, these basic questions about all of it, that if you never actually question it, you're just an automaton NPC walking through life. And maybe there's a point to that. maybe that's your purpose, to just play a role for someone else. That's fine. And this is not a judgment on people. And this is the other thing I really want to say, to make sure that people hear this too, is this is not a condemnation of people that are religious or have these beliefs. Honestly, if that works for you and you are getting something back, because I've been through it. I had some really profound, really good experiences with Christianity and the religious spiritual teachings, but I grew out of them just as I grew out of my childhood, and I don't think of things in childlike terms anymore. I'm now an adult, and I expand my consciousness to see, as you said, from a higher perspective. You start to see more and more, and it's okay to formulate new ideas and new opinions about what you believe is true, and to be able to change that should be our fundamental right. Our birthright is to have this personal perspective and experience and be that facet for God, to explore it from this other's perspective. Now, that's not to say that we should be wishy-washy and just, bite at every little, bait that comes by like a fish might. We want to anchor that in some kind of principles and some kind of contemplative thought to really understand and find what works for us in that time. And this comes back to the whole permission slips idea of, what is the right path? Which is the right religion? Which is the right prayer? Which is the right meditation? Well, you know what? They're all just permission slips to step into sacred space, to connect with the divine, to connect with ourselves, and to explore what's there for now in the moment, and not have to judge it. We don't have to label it even. We don't have to share it with anyone even. We don't have to do all these things. And we certainly don't have to force other people to do it. That's the one part I don't like. If you're a religious zealot, we're not going to have a very good relationship, because I am not into having other people dictate how I think or what I do. And so I claim my sovereignty, and I declare that, and I declare that against the government and any other institution or any other body that comes to seek to control my sovereignty. That is mine to control. This body is mine. I've been given this birthright to control it. And what I want to put in it is my business. Period.
I am that I am. I'm sovereign. I'm free. I'm divine. Yep. And that's it at the end of the day. And one term that was coming to me a lot is 0 point. Like this was some term, 0 point, came to me a couple of years ago, and now I'm learning more about that. But I know 0 point is really just tapping into your heart and focusing and playing with the breath, and knowing that in this moment, in this just now moment, I can choose whatever I need, because there is a soup of fluidity there that I can just step into. But it's just coming to this now moment of, my next action is actually something that I can create, and how I perceive it and how I imagine it, I can step forward and I can bring that to me. and I can create it how it is. And I don't need to be hearing this distraction of other people dictating to me how that needs to be. So I feel like when I wake up in the morning, I do ground myself into 0 point to where I listen. I'm like, I can hear the heartbeat. I can hear my heartbeat, and I notice my breathing, and I feel like I just ground myself, and I'm just so grateful. So I bring in the emotion of love and gratitude, and I say to myself, where is it that I want to be today? How can I contribute and share? And there was another aspect of the cross that I used to do was when I'm connecting here, when I'm connecting to the up and down, the vertical point, that when I'm connecting and I'm drawing in and I'm pulling in the light, and I am the vine, I'm creating and I'm pulling in the vine, that I'm sending out the branches to those who need to hear this and who need to maybe be initiated or have a feeling and be seen. And maybe I can bring that forth to people today. So that's another level of picking up the cross, but not in a subservient, suffering type of way, but more in an empowerment of what can I pull in order to learn and then share. And so that's another aspect of, the cross for me.
Right. And it's taking up that cross. That's taking action. Like you have to take action. You can't just sit there
Standing
and let
up.
somebody else
Yeah.
do it all for you. You have to take action. And also it's funny that the story of the mustard seed has been coming up for me over and over and over again. That Jesus, and it's planting that little tiny seed. And sometimes that's all we can do is plant. And that's really our goal with this podcast, is to plant seeds for you to go out and find out what is your own truth. What is the truth that resonates with you? How can you become the highest and best version of yourself? And I think we can all agree as human beings that the highest and best version of yourself is not out harming other people and taking advantage of other people and hurting other people. It's not me first. It's a balance, everything, which is why I'm writing a book called Finding Balance, because everything comes back to balance. It all comes back to balance. And we have to figure out who we are. Like that authentic, true, that 1 point, the still point, 1 point, 0 point. Richard Rudd talks about that a lot in Gene Keys, and a lot of meditations he does is come into that and tap into that 1 point, that still point within yourself, that animating piece of life that brings you to life and makes us our own individual expression of self. And it's like really tapping into that life force and using it for the highest good of all. Using it and to do that, you get your life forces. It comes down through the portals, through the ethers, and comes through your mother and is bing, lights a little spark in you. And then you come animated and you come to life. And then you get a body, and you get to take that body and what you put in it, you are responsible for that body. You're responsible for loving it, for taking care of it, for nourishing it, for all the things that you do. And when you harm your body, you get to deal with the consequences of those choices. You're always a choice. I can choose to eat healthy and make the hard choice and be disciplined with or I can just eat sweets and sugar and junk and soda pops and just, things like that all the time. And then complain that I'm a victim of my genes, or I can take authority over my body. And then the same thing with like learning to bring what we bring into our minds. I believe that our bodies are our starting point. That's kind of our first school that we get to learn how to manage and manipulate or navigate, not manipulate, manifest, and our bodies. And then it's what we put into our minds. So if you spend your life just sitting and consuming mind-numbing content and programming, and you're constantly allowing yourself to be programmed by watching the news and television and advertisements and things like that, and you're always being programmed, and you're not being conscious in your own what you're taking in and what you're knowing, it can be. You kind of you lose your sense of self. So it's really being conscious and going out and studying and pursuing higher learning and pursuing higher knowledge. And then when you get something and you understand it, you know it, and you apply it to your life, and you're living a principle-based life, then your life, this is something he says all the time that I love, is by your fruits you shall know them. Then your life is producing the fruits of living that principled life.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes from the Bible, because it really rings true for me. Like, You can tell by what's being created, what someone's results are of their process, shows you what they're really doing. Because the deception, you can deceive people with words and all kinds of stuff. I can do all kinds of smoke and mirrors and get you to believe certain things. But at the end of the day, when you see what's actually produced, you go, that isn't what you said you were producing. You know?
Right. And I've even noticed it with a lot of very highly religious people who just need to constantly say, praise God. And it's like within every breath. And I see them struggling and suffering. And then I'll also hear them say, well, it's not me. It's not because of me. It's because God, you know, it's like
they're a victim.
But I'm like, wait a minute. But God gives you like you're the co-creator here. So
Right.
if you're putting your hands up and saying, no, it's not me, that in and of itself, which is another word study, is blasphemous, because you're actually hindering and slowing down the flow of allowing it to work through you, so that you do recognize yourself as being the creator on earth physically, but you're tapping in and you're receiving the information on how to do that. But when you're saying, oh, no, it's not me, it's coming from outside of me somewhere, and then they're struggling so much, I feel like that's like probably one of the hardest things for me to witness in people, because they're trying so hard to be the good doer. I know you see them. I do so good.
I used to be. That was the version of me that was try. And you can ask my kids, because the old Lois is not anything like the new Lois. I like this version of myself better. And, you know, I've been, you know, a lot of my family and friends have really think I've gone off the deep end, but I'm happy. I'm not in struggle. I'm healthy. The fruits of my life bear that out. I'm no longer faking it till I make it. It's genuine and real and authentic. But back when I was deep in struggle and I was believing in God and putting all my faith in God, and there was just this song, give them all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrows into joy, and turn it over to God constantly. And I was waking up, God, what am I doing wrong? Why me? What am I, you know, why are you doing this to me? Why? I have had enough struggle. I've had enough adversity. I've had enough, you know, I can't take anymore. Oh, God doesn't dump on you any more than you can bear. And I'm like, no. You know, I can't sit around. And then one day I had this deep realization, I cannot sit around and wait for some big shining knight in white armor to come by and save me. Nobody is going to save me. I have to create change. I have to sit down and question some of these belief systems that I have that are preventing me from living the life that I know I deserve, that I came here to live, a life of abundance, a life of joy, a life with deep connection, a life with purpose and passion, you know, and I have to make the change myself. Like, I have to take action toward that. I got to get clear on what it looks like. I got to stop focusing on everything that's wrong with the world and everything that's wrong with me. And I got to get clear on what I want to create. And then everything that is not that, I let it go. And I focus on creating the highest, best version of myself so that I can give. We have to take care of ourselves. This is I started this, I don't know if I finished the point earlier. We have to take care of ourselves and honor ourselves first, and fill our cup so that we are overflowing, and making sure that we are nourishing our own soul, so that we can go out and share our gifts with the world, so that we can go out and share all of the amazingness, because every single person on this planet came here for a divine purpose. And some of them may have came to play NPCs. Some of them may have soul contracts, and that's their role, is to give somebody else an experience. And, you know, and so for some people that may be their life. They maybe came here to play the bad guy, you know?
Yep.
And that's something that they took on karmically because of something they did in a previous life. And it's really interesting that you brought up the story about, the other day I was having a conversation with my mom, and from the time I was like 3 or 4 years old, I would always say, in my next life, I'm going to be this. In my last life. And my mom doesn't believe in reincarnation. And she's like, and she kind of mentioned, we had a funny conversation about that. She goes, you've always been that way. And she said, you've always been the peacemaker. Like, I was constantly, from the time I was a little bitty girl, And that's funny that's my evolution in Gene Keys is the peacemaker.
Oh, interesting.
That's who I'm. Yeah, that's in one of my prime gifts is to being the peacemaker. And she said, and I was always really drawn to the esoteric. I would grab. My mom is one of those people that reads the newspaper. She's probably going to die with the newspaper in her hand. Like she literally gets up every morning and she goes outside and gets the newspaper, and she comes in and she does her Bible study, and then she reads the newspaper. And I used to always run as a kid and grab the newspaper and go straight to the astrology section, straight to the horoscope. That's the only thing in the newspaper. I wanted to read the sports stuff and the astrology stuff. I've always had just draw toward the esoteric and want to understand, this wisdom and knowledge. But I never felt like I had permission to explore it because I was constantly being taught, that it was a sin and that it was wrong. And when I was in college, I started studying A Course in Miracles, and while I found a lot of value in it, and I know now that it was created by the person that created MK Ultra and all that stuff, my parents they were devastated by that. Like they were just really, and then I pursued these paths of I kept seeking out all of these because that's what I've been drawn to. And I go into them, I dive into them, and I take the things that resonate and the things that feel like truth in my soul, and I let all the rest of it go. And what I've learned, and something that we should probably make clear on this podcast, is we're all in different places in our path and journey. I have evolved through so many different belief systems, and there's certain core principles that have remained true throughout the entire thing. And that's why where I've landed now is we need to live a principle-based life. And it doesn't have to be defined as a religion or any of that stuff.
Right.
It must be based in real principles that get results, that honor the sacredness of life and the incredible gift that we get to come here and experience being an embodied human. And our eternal, infinite souls get constricted down into a little human body, and we get to feel and taste and touch and see and experience emotions and love and hate and this full gamut of being human that we wouldn't probably get to experience if we were living eternal light and bliss in the primordial soup of all that is, So we get to come down here into a 3D expression to experience duality, to experience, the polarity, to experience contrast, and to learn from that and to allow it to evolve our soul. And then I believe that we can keep coming back as often as we want. We can incarnate in and out. As we need to continue to evolve our souls. And for me, I feel like I have an ancient soul. I feel like a very, very old soul. And I feel like I have this deep commitment to the human experience and to, I have the gene key. My life purpose is the 15th gene key, which is all about the bodhisattva of compassion. It's about, and my life's work is compassion. And it's about taking the bodhisattva vow. So I have compassion and compassion on top of each other in a line in my gene keys. And it's about really, really living into a desire to see humanity out of suffering and out of not falling into despair, and to living the life of abundance that I feel like is our birthright. Our birthright is to be sovereign beings and live this life of abundance. I feel like we don't have to have all the suffering. It isn't necessary all the time to live in complete suffering your entire life, and I look at my parents, and my parents are really good Christian people. And I cannot say this enough because I don't want anybody thinking I'm bashing Christianity, because I'm not. My parents live what they're few of the human beings that actually walk their talk and live what they believe, and I honor that for them. And they've lived this deep life of suffering, and their life is so full of hardship and adversity and suffering, and it breaks my heart. And they're almost 80 years old, and I don't know if they have really any joy in their life at all, really, but they're living for this future thing. And I'm like, you get this one life as this person, Lois, living in this body and, having this experience, and you might as well make the most of it.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I get to have it in multiple different realms and dimensions and switch through, and that's all I get to do. Or who knows the truth of that? But I feel like Yeah, it could all be true. Or none of it could be true. It could all be just stories we're making up.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I really believe, it was interesting because I have always talked about reincarnation, and I knew nothing about it. I was never taught anything about it because it was just, it's a concept that my parents don't believe in at all. But I completely believe that we come back over and over and over again. And I've had lots of experiences once I dove into plant medicines and things like that, where I went through, particularly my experience with iboga, which literally put a big screen. We'll have to put that video where we tell.
I know
together about my iboga experience, but it literally laid out all of my past lives. And I had, as it was playing them across the screen, I had recognition and a remembrance of those lives and those experiences. And the medicine was like, do you see the expansiveness of your soul? Like, this is incredible, and if we knew how spectacular it was to have this human experience, I think that people would treat it differently. Like, we would value it and we would want
to enjoy it.
We'd actually want to enjoy it. And
enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah. How I perceive and how I express to people who have a hard time wrapping their minds around reincarnation, because I stopped using that term, or I have pulled away from the term reincarnation, and it's a past life, but I refer to it as a quantum life. Mm-hmm. Because in the Akashic records, in the Akashic field, everything has already happened. There's multiple different timelines. You can choose a different future, however you want to go, because your future just isn't like really set in stone all the time. There is like some predestination. So when I talk about that we come here. So there's two types of free will. Like, there's the predestined free will where you choose, and it's all done before you actually step into that body. Yeah, it's like your soul contracts, and sometimes people don't even come in with a soul contract, which is actually very hard for them. But anyway, they will step into the body, and there's that imprint. And so if you're thinking of, okay, there's a past life, you're actually just reaching into an imprint that's meant for you to actually experience. So let's say I was to say that you are the reincarnation of Marie Antoinette. Well, really just have an imprintation in your contract on some of those things. And so because there could be other people who can be saying the same thing. Right. And that your consciousness is just anchored in this timeline, whereas there might be a different consciousness of you that you're going to recall in another one at another period of time. And so when we're doing those psychedelics and those plant medicines, that's where you're sort of like shifting and going. And it's not that it's false, but there's something there that does resonate. And then you're coming back, as you come back to your senses, you've learned something, and then it's a teaching moment. Oh, I just learned this about that. So when we had done mushrooms that time, I just sat there and I was like, I know nothing. I know what I know is I know absolutely sure that I know nothing. I think I know something, but I know for sure I know nothing. And as much as I try to say that I know stuff, maybe I know it in this moment. Could it change? Sure. But also, I feel like there's just this massive quantum field. And so I've been able to just share, especially with my husband, because he doesn't like to hear the term reincarnation. So I just say, well, we're quantumly entangled with some other aspect of our soul and some other timeline. And when I say it like that, he kind of gets it. But if I sit here and I say, we are reincarnated and blah, 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 it's harder for him to wrap his mind around because of the indoctrination, because of what he's been taught,
and we also,
so I just offer that to you, that you can maybe just say that kind of term too.
We tend to have a very linear perspective because of how we relate to the world. And so this idea of reincarnation, like was she Marie Antoinette, and maybe other people were, but the way but here's the thing: is like even as an analogy in our world, in the digital world, I can take a file and I could duplicate that file many times. Let's say a movie file, and now that movie file can be played out by all these different people. Can now watch the same movie file, and we all have this similar experience but different.
Yes.
Okay. So it's similar but different. So this is how I kind of see that idea where, we have these connections maybe to these past life experiences. And was that us? Was it specifically just one being moving through one life and then moving to another life? That's our linear mind thinking, wanting to say that's the way it is. But as you said, many people will claim to be this or that, and it's the same being, the same famous person per se, let's say. It's perfectly reasonable to me to think that there could be resonance in that lifetime that you are connected with, and you're bringing that resonance with you into this world because it's in resonance with who you are. And so that makes sense to me, and that we hold these frequencies within us and we bring it through this life in a different flavoring. And now it's different because now my experience is very different than my brother's or whoever, even if we're genetically identical. We still have different experiences. We're going to express those genes differently, and things will show up differently. There's definitely some resonance, and we'll have some similar experiences for sure. And I even have that with my sensei right now. We have these interesting things happening where we're having almost the same kind of experiences at the same time, and he's telling me the same thing. We call it OSA, which is a coming together, a parody of experiences, and it happens over and over and over. You start to have these with people. To me, it's a really good indicator that you're on your path with that person, like you're supposed to be connecting with that person in some way. It's like a little signal to let you know things are good. Alignment. Things are in alignment.
Cool.
It's pretty cool.
Can I go use the bathroom really quick?
Yes,
sorry.
Yeah, we can pause and
come
back. No problem. Let's take a short break. That's good.